Hi everyone, how's it going? Today I'm going to talk about the 1981 film Time Bandits. And you can see the poster there, the Terry Gilliam film from 1981. Now you can argue that this is not a science fiction film, but it has sci-fi elements to it. It's a time travel movie for starters, and it's more of a fantastical adventure, but hey, why not? Why not include it as think of it as a science fiction movie? So this film was produced by George Harrison, his Handmade Productions, his studio, and George Harrison was really the only Beatle who got into cinema seriously with producing cinema. I guess Ringo did a lot of acting, McCartney dabbled with acting, and Lennon as well, but Harrison produced a lot of movies, working closely with the Monty Python crew, kind of almost like an unofficial member, one might say, and of course Gilliam's association with Monty Python. Michael Palin co-wrote the script as well for Time Bandits. What I like about this movie, it's made for kids, but it's a dense movie. There's so many themes and ideas in Time Bandits. It might be Terry Gilliam's best movie, my favorite film of his, because I find this movie gets better with each viewing. So I figured, why not talk about it somewhat? It's What is the film about? It's about a little boy who is kind of ignored by his parents, who seem more interested in watching television, and just they don't like him in their hair all the time. He's very interested in history, and he's trying to explain to his parents about the Kevin, the boy's name, trying to explain to them all this cool stuff he's learned about Greek history, and they're just not interested. Okay, then we get very fantastical, where in his room we learn there's a time portal in his room, and we actually see pictures in his room of all the historical figures he's going to meet, or different eras he's going to visit, and he is ends up with a group of time bandits, this group of little people who their job was to replace holes in the space-time continuum, and instead they are abusing their power, one might say, to try to steal treasure and enrich themselves. There is the supreme being, who is the godlike figure in this movie, who's played by there's Ralph Richardson, highly esteemed British actor, but this film has one of the best casts, I think, of the 1980s for British cinema. Anyway, with David Rappaport as Randall, who is the leader of the Time Bandits, and Kenny Baker, of course, also with the Time Bandits. John Cleese shows up as Robin Hood. Sean Connery appears as Agamemnon. You have Shelley Duvall in here, Katherine Hellman, Ian Holm plays Napoleon. So just a really fun cast. David Warner plays the villain, simply named Evil. Warner is just perfect as the antagonist in the film. So a great cast, and so they take Kevin, and they are jumping through history. First, they end up, I believe, in Napoleon's time period, and it sets up the scene as well, where we're in one of Napoleon's Italian campaigns, and they've just taken a castle. And played by Ian Holm, Napoleon is very much a buffoon. Okay, he's so enraptured with this puppet show, or that he's watching. He just seems oblivious to everything that's going on. He has moments of cruelty, moments of generosity and kindness, and Gilliam's commentary and all these huge figures in history, and how they're all a little sociopathic and psychotic. So Napoleon's a great way to start out the story with what's happening. Then we go to medieval England. We meet Robin Hood, played by John Cleese, who is also kind of just a silly, buffoonish character. I've read that Cleese based his performance on Queen Elizabeth II and the way she interacts with the public. So Robin Hood is kind of giving these platitudes about the poor and how we should think about the poor, and that he's, it's all very surface level, and he's just shaking everyone's hand like, oh, and how are you? Oh, great to meet you. So that's very funny as well. So, and that sets up this theme in the movie where Gilliam is questioning history itself. It is a movie for kids, but I think adults can just lock into this. This may be the most brilliant film that I think kids can lock into, but adults can lock into as well, where a lot of Gilliam's impression of history, it's all absurd, it's all farcical, all of it's contradictory and doesn't make much sense at all. And I really like that about the film. At one point, Kevin goes back to ancient Greece with Sean Connery as Agamemnon, and that's a more nuanced portrait as well, where Connery is playing Agamemnon as heroic and very caring of Kevin and wants to adopt him as his son, but we also get a sense of the brutality around ancient Greece and how it's just not really commented upon or thought of as at all. So there is, Gilliam commenting on a warlike culture and a militaristic culture and how cold it can become. So there's just a lot of things like that too. The movie, there are so many influences on Time Bandits. I think Robert Louis Stevenson, there's a lot of like Treasure Island and that type of story here. The A Boy's Adventure story is very much an influence. C.S. Lewis, I think, and his fantasy. Maybe it was just the toy chest in the room or the cabinet in the room recalls C.S. Lewis, drawing upon a lot of folklore and fairy tales as well in the film. Monty Python, I mentioned. Wizard of Oz is also a big influence, and the fact that it is a time travel story where these characters are jumping through time, and how much fun you can have with that concept. It's not all the Back to the Future stuff of worried about of paradoxes or changing history. And this, I love how this film handles time travel. It's just this way for the time bandits to enrich themselves and just have a rollicking good time, and I like that. And also the movie is really much about imagination and how imagination as a weapon against a very cold bureaucratic world. Once again, that's a Terry Gilliam concept that's here throughout Time Bandits, and the reality where Kevin is in our present, where adults appear to be very consumerist, very conformist. This is sort of like early Thatcher's England, but just how oblivious adults are and how so many adults lose their imaginations as they become older and are willing to look the other way for a lot of injustices and things like that. So the idea of imagination as a kind of resistance to a world that's really cold and run by people who are not very good. So that's a great theme running through the story as well. That contrast of the great adventure, the exuberance of imagination clashing with the realities of the world, and David Warner as his character Evil. He's very interested in technology and wants to use computer technology to kind of increase his foothold on the world, and he's really good as a villain as well as chasing the Time Bandits throughout the ages, and just the sense of absurdity in the final confrontation with Evil, where they're calling like cowboys and knights and all these great warriors of history, and Evil is just like easily dispensing of all of them. So I like the commentary there. There's this one moment very evocative of a fairy tale where they end up on a ship with a sea ogre, and the ogre is intimidating, but at the same time is has back pain and is kind of controlled by his wife, and seems a very sad, like a monster we're supposed to hate and be repulsed by, and even we feel kind of some sympathy for the ogre character, and how he's dispatched is like very undramatic as well. So that was also well done in the movie. But as I said, it's such a dense film, and you could really go through it scene by scene, frame by frame, and really just have something interesting to talk about what's going on, whether it's Gilliam's commentary on history, or the imagination, or just the dark realities of the world as well, which we have. The look of the film is great. Like even like the evil and all of his minions, like they all kind of have like this. They're dressed in like these plastic bubbles, and there's pipes going through them. 12 Monkeys would do that well. The film Gilliam made in the 90s, but the look of the film is so distinct, and it's not a are there moments of sentimentality in this movie? Maybe a few. Maybe I think with Sean Connery's character, and Connery appears at the end, interestingly enough, in a guise as a fireman. So that character seems to symbolize hope, or at least something to believe in anyway in the film. But like I said, there is this anti-sentimental strain running through the story as well, and just how the ragtag group of time bandits are, their motives aren't always in the right place, and they're not always doing the right thing, but they're scrappy, and they believe in each other, and ultimately you're rooting for them, and it's sort of, it's their imperfections and their flaws that make them interesting characters, and whereas like the Napoleon character is so ridiculous and so absurd, where we don't really feel much towards the Napoleon character at all. So yeah, well, a lot of great contrast and symbolism in Time Bandits. So yeah, just a enjoyable movie. I came to this movie late. I don't think I ever watched it when I was a young person. I don't know if I never caught it on TV or cable or anything like that, but there's just memorable lines. I liked "You're in the hands of a lunatic." I don't know, that line made me laugh, but there's just a number of great lines throughout the film. Very quotable movie, I'm sure. An easy movie to karaoke. But yeah, the look of it is so great. Like there's a scene where the Time Bandits and Kevin are trapped in these cages that are kind of dangling, and they have to escape. And it's really done. It's really almost something out of silent cinema. It's really interesting how they manage to make the escape in that scene. So just visually, it's a feast. This movie. There's also a brief scene on the Titanic as well in Time Bandits. So just it's almost kind of psychedelic in some ways, the way it keeps jumping through different realities, different time periods, and yet we start to see the contrast, but also the similarities between all the different settings and characters that Gilliam is throwing at us in Time Bandits. So it's yeah, and we have a very, depending on how you interpret the ending, on one level it's quite grim, but I don't know if you walk out of this movie feeling devastated by the ending. I mean, there is a certain melancholy to the ending, but at the same time, there's such an exuberance. I think you feel the exuberance of this movie and how the power of the imagination. I think you do walk out of this movie with, a little bit more faith, a little bit more hope in making the best of your reality in the face of all the obstacles that we have to get through on on a daily basis. So I think in some ways that's why what makes maybe Gilliam's best film, because I think all of his films say that to a certain extent. Brazil, which I'll talk about, kind of goes in a much more grim, darker direction, and 12 Monkeys as well. But I like the exuberance and optimism running through Time Bandits, which makes it a lot of fun. So anyway, and we have a great song in the closing credits, "Dream Away" by George Harrison. It's the perfect song to end this movie on, and I like how I like it when movies in the end credits where you get screenshots or of freeze frames of what's happened, of the movie, kind of a recap of the movie as this great song is playing. So yeah, I think you walk out of this movie feeling really good. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Time Bandits. So thanks for watching, and I will talk to you later. Bye.